Shocking truth about healthy fruits. Good morning, everyone. Let's clear something up right away. I'm not here to demonize fruit. Fruit isn't evil, and it's certainly not poison. However, context is important. Today, I want to discuss a very specific context, preserving leg strength and functional longevity in seniors, and explain why some common fruits might actually hinder your progress instead of helping it. This is not about weight loss, it's not about fads, it's about preserving your independence, your balance, your ability to get up off the floor without assistance at 80, not 60. And there's a direct line from nutrition to leg strength, and it has nothing to do with how much you can squat. It has everything to do with your metabolic function. Let's frame the issue. When we talk about longevity, especially in my clinic, we don't just mean lifespan, we mean health span. And in the realm of health span, leg strength is one of the most underrated and yet most predictive indicators of both quality and quantity of life as we age. It's not just about the number of years you live, but how many of those years you remain independent, mobile, and cognitively intact. Surprisingly, leg strength, more than arm strength, grip strength, or even bone density, plays an outsized role in determining that trajectory. Why? Because your legs are your interface with the physical world. Everything from getting out of a chair to walking across a room, climbing stairs, or catching yourself from falling, that's all lower body dominant. Lose that and you don't just lose strength, you lose autonomy. We can break this down into several levels: biomechanical, neuromuscular, metabolic, and hormonal. Let's start biomechanically. Your legs house the largest muscles in your body, the quadriceps, glutes, hamstrings, and calves. When these muscles atrophy, which they do as early as your 40s and accelerate in your 60s and beyond, the implications are profound. Walking speed decreases. Your ability to generate force, whether it's to get off the toilet or recover from a stumble, drops. And critically, your power output plummets even faster than your raw strength. Power, not just strength, is what gets you up the stairs without leaning on the railing or gets you off the ground when you fall. This distinction is essential. Power is strength expressed quickly, and it's far more predictive of aging outcomes than strength alone. We lose power at about twice the rate we lose strength after age 50. That's because fast-twitch muscle fibers, which drive power, are preferentially lost with aging, unless actively preserved through training and nutrition. Neuromuscularly, we also start to see changes in how our brain connects to our muscles. The motor units, essentially the wiring between your nervous system and your muscle fibers, begin to degrade. It's not just a matter of weaker muscles. The muscles aren't being told to fire efficiently anymore. This is partly due to aging, but also due to disuse. If you're not training, not walking briskly, not squatting, not engaging in resistance training, the body adapts to that inactivity. It downregulates neural drive. Muscles don't just atrophy, they become uncoordinated, slower to activate, less efficient. This is where leg strength starts to intersect with fall risk. Most falls in older adults don't occur from slipping on a banana peel. They occur because of delayed reaction time, poor eccentric control, or loss of balance, all of which tie directly back to leg strength, particularly in the hips and glutes. And a fall after age 65 is often the first domino in a catastrophic sequence of health decline. 1 in 3 seniors who fracture a hip will die within a year, not necessarily from the fracture itself, but from the cascade of immobility, muscle loss, and infection that follows. So, when I say leg strength is life-saving, I mean that literally, not figuratively. Then we get into the metabolic dimension, which is arguably even more critical. Skeletal muscle is the largest glucose sink in the body. It's where the majority of your postprandial, after eating, glucose gets shuttled, stored, and burned. The more lean muscle mass you maintain, especially in the legs, the better your body can regulate blood sugar, insulin, and ultimately your risk for conditions like type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, and even dementia. In other words, stronger legs don't just mean better mobility, they mean better metabolic health. Now let's think through the reverse scenario. What happens when leg strength declines? Insulin resistance increases. Blood sugar excursions become more extreme. Fat accumulates viscerally around the liver, the pancreas, and even in intramuscular deposits. Mitochondrial density and function decline. You produce less ATP per glucose molecule, leading to fatigue, brain fog, and eventually chronic disease. You might not feel it in the moment. You just feel more tired going up the stairs or standing for too long. But underneath, your metabolic machinery is decaying, and once that becomes systemic, it's very hard to reverse. There's also a hormonal cascade tied to declining muscle mass. Testosterone, growth hormone, and IGF-1, all of which play a role in muscle maintenance and repair, are responsive to muscle use. If you're not stimulating your leg muscles, you're not just losing size and strength. You're suppressing the very hormones that could be helping you retain muscle, burn fat, and stay cognitively sharp. It's a negative feedback loop that reinforces itself. Less activity, lower hormones, more muscle loss, even less activity. From a systems biology standpoint, your legs are like a massive metabolic engine. When they're firing well, the rest of your body benefits, your brain, your heart, your endocrine system. But when that engine degrades, everything else has to work harder to compensate. The heart pumps harder. The brain struggles more with blood flow regulation, and recovery from injury or illness takes longer. Now, all of this isn't meant to scare you. It's meant to create urgency, because unlike your genetics or your chronological age, this is something you can change. Leg strength is highly trainable, even into your 80s and 90s. We've seen this over and over again in the data and in the clinic. People in their 70s who take up resistance training see marked improvements in gait speed, balance, and even VO2 max. You can regenerate lost strength, rebuild muscle, and improve your quality of life at nearly any age. But the earlier you start, the more buffer you create against the inevitable losses of aging. And this ties back to nutrition, which is often misunderstood. You cannot outwalk or outstretch a bad diet. If your protein intake is too low, if your insulin is chronically elevated, if you're spiking blood sugar multiple times a day, you're actively undermining muscle maintenance, even if you're eating clean or following conventional health advice. You may still be nutritionally sabotaging your legs if you're not paying attention to the metabolic response of what you're consuming. Which brings us to fruits, seemingly harmless, often marketed as the ultimate healthy snack. But in the aging population, where insulin sensitivity is already declining, eating high-fructose fruits multiple times a day without adequate fiber, protein, or metabolic control can accelerate the decline in muscle performance. The legs are the first to pay the price, not instantly, but over years. So this isn't about vilifying fruit. This is about aligning your diet with your most critical longevity asset, functional strength. And leg strength specifically is the non-negotiable pillar of that strategy. If there's one thing you take away from all of this, let it be this: strong legs equals strong life. Keep them strong, metabolically, mechanically, and neurologically, and you will not only live longer, but live better. Let me be very clear. Fruit is not among aging insulin-resistant adults, is misaligned with the goal of preserving leg strength, stabilizing blood sugar, and preventing muscle decline. The natural follow-up question becomes, what should we do instead? Because the answer can't simply be, don't eat these fruits. That's reductionist, and it misses the bigger picture. The goal isn't to fruit juice, the silent leg killer, eliminate fruit. It's to build a nutritional environment that supports metabolic flexibility, preserves lean mass, and promotes mitochondrial health. So let's talk about alternatives that do exactly that. Choose low glycemic, high polyphenol fruits. Not all fruits are created equal. Some offer a far more favorable nutritional profile, particularly those that are lower in sugar, higher in fiber, and packed with antioxidants that actually support mitochondrial and vascular health. Topping the list are berries, especially blackberries, raspberries, and wild blueberries. These fruits are naturally low in sugar, around 5 to 7 grams per half cup, high in fiber, and rich in anthocyanins, a type of antioxidant with anti-inflammatory and blood sugar regulating benefits. Unlike many tropical fruits, they lead to only a small increase in blood glucose, thanks in part to their fiber content that slows digestion. Avocados, which are technically fruits, are another excellent choice. They're full of heart-healthy monounsaturated fats, fiber, and potassium, while containing minimal sugar. Their low impact on blood sugar makes them a smart nutritional option, particularly for older adults focused on maintaining metabolic health. Olives, another often forgotten fruit, are high in polyphenols, low in carbs, and beneficial for endothelial function. Great as part of a protein-rich meal. If you want to eat fruit regularly, these are the kinds that support your goals rather than undermine them. 2. Pair fruit with protein or fat. One of the best ways to blunt the glycemic impact of fruit is to never eat it alone. Most people consume fruit as a snack on an empty stomach between meals. That's the worst-case scenario if you're trying to stabilize blood glucose. Instead, pair it strategically. Berries plus Greek yogurt, high protein. Apple slices plus almond butter, healthy fats. Cottage cheese plus raspberries, fiber and casein protein. This slows gastric emptying, reduces postprandial glucose spikes, and provides a more stable energy curve. It also helps ensure that fruit plays a supporting role in your diet, never the main event. Time carbohydrate intake to your metabolic windows. This principle cannot be overstated. Insulin sensitivity is not static. It changes throughout the day and is influenced by physical activity. Muscle tissue becomes more insulin sensitive following resistance training or intense aerobic exercise. This is when your body is most capable of safely and effectively disposing of glucose. That means if you're going to eat. How these fruits accelerate muscle decline. Carbohydrate-dense fruits, even a banana, the best time to do it is within 60 to 90 minutes post-workout. Outside of that window, keep higher sugar fruits to a minimum, especially if you're not training or if you're in a state of insulin resistance. Think of fruit as a metabolic tool, not an anytime food. Consider fruit frequency and quantity. Here's something I discuss often with patients. Just because a food is healthy doesn't mean it's appropriate daily or in large amounts. A few strawberries a couple of times per week, likely fine. A daily smoothie with mango, banana, pineapple, and dates. That's a dessert disguised as health food. So audit your intake. Not just what fruit you're eating, but how often, in what quantity, and in what context. For someone trying to regain leg strength or reverse sarcopenia, we often limit fruit to Don't. 2 servings of low glycemic fruit per day, only with protein or post-training. 5. Emphasize vegetables, especially bitter and fermented ones. People who overconsume fruit often underconsume vegetables. But for aging adults, non-starchy vegetables, especially cruciferous, e.g. broccoli, kale, leafy greens, and fermented options like kimchi or sauerkraut offer more metabolic benefit with fewer glucose consequences. These foods are extremely high in micronutrients, feed a healthy gut microbiome, blunt blood sugar response from meals, don't interfere with fat oxidation or muscle fueling. If you're craving volume, texture, or freshness, swap the fruit bowl for a colorful vegetable plate. Your mitochondria will thank you. 6. Use fruit as a garnish, not a staple. This might be the most important mindset shift. For most people, fruit is treated like a base or a core food group. But for metabolically compromised individuals, it should be more like a flavor accent, something you sprinkle in, not something you build a meal around. Examples: a few blueberries on top of chia pudding, a single fig sliced over a salad with olive oil and goat cheese, a slice of citrus in sparkling water, not a glass of juice. This approach gives you the what you should eat instead. Sensory and nutrient benefits of fruit without triggering metabolic instability. Track your personal response. Lastly, and most critically, you are not a statistic. The data I've shared is population level. The individual response varies, and the best way to learn what works for you is to track your own data. Tools like continuous glucose monitors, CGMs, or frequent blood glucose testing can show you exactly how different fruits affect your body. For example, some people may tolerate kiwi very well, but spike dramatically after a banana. Others may find they can handle apples after training, but not first thing in the morning. The more precise your data, the more tailored your choices. And that's the core principle behind personalized, longevity-focused nutrition. So, to summarize, when it comes to aging and muscle health, particularly maintaining leg strength, you don't need to eliminate fruit. You need to reframe how you use it. Choose lower sugar varieties, pair them smartly, time their intake, and avoid eating them in metabolic isolation. Eating in alignment with your physiology isn't about denial, it's about precision. And that's what will move the needle most as you age. Not whether or not something is natural, but whether or not it's appropriate for your goals. Let's get into specifics. When I say these 7 fruits may be hurting, I mean in the context of aging, insulin resistance, and functional decline, especially the kind that shows up in reduced leg strength, slower walking speed, and lower muscle endurance. These aren't bad foods in isolation. They're just metabolically mismatched for people dealing with the downstream effects of aging, declining muscle mass, reduced mitochondrial efficiency, and impaired glucose disposal. So, let's examine them one by one. 1. Bananas, especially overripe. On the surface, bananas seem like a good option. They're portable, they're natural, and they contain potassium. But nutritionally, they're essentially a glucose-fructose bomb with almost no protein, very little fiber, especially when ripe, and a very high glycemic load. A single medium banana contains 14 grams of sugar and can spike blood glucose significantly in insulin-resistant individuals. What's worse, as bananas ripen, their starch breaks down into simpler sugars, meaning an overripe banana hits the bloodstream faster and harder than an unripe one. In someone with poor glucose tolerance, that how to time fruit for performance kind of spike leads to a cascade. insulin surge, crash, increased hunger, further glucose intake, repeat. This often enough, and you create a metabolic state that is hostile to muscle preservation, especially in the legs, where glucose uptake is crucial for performance and maintenance. If you're going to eat a banana, timing is everything. Have it post-resistance training, and preferably pair it with protein, e.g. whey, to blunt the glycemic hit. 2. Grapes. This one surprises a lot of people. Grapes are often thought of as a light snack, something you grab in the afternoon or keep in a bowl on the counter. But let's look at the numbers. 1 cup of grapes contains around 23 grams of sugar, most of it fructose and glucose, with essentially no fiber to slow absorption. What makes grapes uniquely problematic is how easy they are to overeat. You're not just having a grape, you're having a handful or a cup or more. And because they're high water content and low in satiety, they don't trigger fullness. You get a sharp rise in blood sugar without the stop signal, which leads to energy volatility, fat storage, and muscle energy inefficiency. In insulin-resistant individuals, which again includes most people over 60, that rapid glucose surge can mean that little to none of that sugar is getting into muscle, where you need it. Instead, it's getting shuttled to the liver, converted into fat, and contributing to intramuscular lipid accumulation, which ironically makes it even harder to build or maintain leg strength. 3. Pineapple. Pineapple is often praised for its bromelain content, a digestive enzyme with some anti-inflammatory properties. And that's valid. But those benefits come in a package with a very high glycemic index and an even higher glycemic load. 1 cup of pineapple contains 16 grams of sugar, largely in the form of sucrose, which breaks down into glucose and fructose rapidly. Its GI score is over 65, meaning it's considered a high glycemic food, on par with white bread in some studies. And while the vitamin C and enzyme contents sound good on paper, they do not offset the postprandial glucose spike that can impair energy availability in older muscle tissue. If you're eating pineapple without protein or fiber, for example as part of a fruit salad or smoothie, you're almost certainly getting a fast glucose surge with minimal satiety, a net loss if your goal is to optimize metabolic health and preserve strength. 4. Watermelon. Watermelon seems harmless. It's mostly water, after all, right? And yes, it's hydrating. But it's also high glycemic, low satiety, and, like grapes, easy to consume in large amounts without realizing it. A typical 2-cup serving contains about 18 grams of sugar and practically no fiber, fat, or protein. And despite being relatively low in calories, watermelon sugar hits the bloodstream fast, with a glycemic index of around 72. That's very high, especially for people who are not actively depleting glycogen through exercise. As we age, maintaining stable blood sugar levels becomes increasingly important. Foods that cause sharp glucose fluctuations, like watermelon when eaten on its own, can lead to quick spikes followed by crashes. This pattern disrupts energy availability for muscles, which is especially problematic when the goal is to support a steady metabolism and preserve muscle strength. Mangoes are another example of a fruit that may not be ideal in this context. They're among the highest in natural sugars, with 1 cup containing around 23 grams, roughly the same as 6 teaspoons of sugar. Most of this comes in the form of fructose and glucose, and it's delivered with little to no protein or fiber to slow absorption. What makes mango especially problematic is that it's often consumed in large servings. Think smoothies, bowls, or sliced entire mangoes, and it's perceived as a superfruit in some wellness circles. But again, context matters. In a young insulin-sensitive athlete, mango can be a useful carb source. In a 68-year-old with central adiposity and impaired glucose tolerance, it's a metabolic overload. And remember, fructose does not stimulate insulin the way glucose does, which might sound like a good thing, but it actually means your satiety signals don't get activated. You feel less full despite having consumed a large sugar load, making overconsumption more likely. 6. Dried fruits, raisins, dates, apricots. This is where things get really tricky. Dried fruits are the most concentrated form of sugar on this list. A small box of raisins, about 1.5 oz, contains 25 grams of sugar, more than a candy bar. And because drying removes water and shrinks volume, you get massive caloric and glycemic density in very small portions. Even worse, dried fruits are often added to health foods, granola, trail mix, yogurt, turning them into hidden sugar bombs. The body doesn't process raisins differently just because they're natural. Once they hit your digestive tract, they're metabolized rapidly, leading to sharp glucose and fructose spikes. If your goal is blood sugar stability, muscle retention, or weight control, especially in aging, dried fruits are a net negative, unless used very strategically, e.g. during endurance training or paired with high-protein meals. 7. Fruit juices, orange, apple, grape, even cold-pressed. Let's be blunt. Fruit juice is soda with a vitamin label. 1 cup of orange juice has about 20 to 26 grams of sugar, no fiber, and a glycemic index of 66. And just because it comes from oranges doesn't make it less metabolically harmful. When the fiber is removed, sugar is absorbed much more quickly. While you probably wouldn't eat 5 whole oranges in one sitting, drinking their juice only takes about 15 seconds. This rapid influx of liquid glucose and fructose overwhelms the liver, triggers a spike in insulin, and encourages fat buildup in the liver. Over time, these effects can lead to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, increased belly fat, and worsening insulin resistance, all of which negatively impact muscle function and leg strength. Juice also affects the brain differently than whole fruit. It doesn't provide the same feeling of fullness or satisfaction, which often leads to eating more later on. After consuming around 150 calories and causing a blood sugar spike, you may feel hungrier within an hour, creating a cycle that disrupts metabolic balance.